All right, we've got Scott Chasen back with us once again. He's a correspondent for the Topeka Capital Journal. Nice to have you. Let's talk KU football. So last time you were here, we talked about the quarterback battle. And now we're still in the quarterback battle. What do you see from these KU quarterbacks?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that we're kind of still in this because in many ways we moved forward and now we're right back exactly where we were. So looking at Kansas, Montel Cozart named the starter at the beginning of the year. Then Ryan Willis kind of usurps him from that role. Cozart didn't play especially well, and Willis didn't really play especially well either. Willis has the vote of confidence from Beatty, plays 2 weeks with no questions about it, and we get to Tuesday, and lo and behold, David Beatty says, we're going to put the best quarterback out there. You know, it's on his, I believe it was on the Big 12 coaches teleconference, and all of a sudden there's that uncertainty again. So, you know, at this point, if you're a Kansas quarterback, I really don't know what you do. I don't know how you feel confident. I don't know how you don't feel like if I make a mistake that my coach might be pulling me. It's a mess right now, and that's to be blunt because, you know, both guys have looked good, but the one thing that you can't do is keep changing them. Ryan Willis he's only a sophomore. He only played about half of last year. Montel Cozart is a redshirt junior. You know what you're going to get out of him. Excuse me, there's also Carter Stanley, who he's shown himself maybe not to be ready yet, but he's capable if they want to look for the future. So at this point, I really think David Beatty needs to make a decision, put his confidence in that guy and go with it, because we talked to Ryan Willis, especially after his starts where they were close against TCU, and if you talk to him during the week, he says, you know, the way he talks, you can tell that his coach believes in him, he feels good, he's focused on getting his first win as a starter rather than just playing well. And I think when you do this and you mix it up and you don't put your confidence in a guy, then you just go right back to this whole, you know, if I don't play well, rather than if I don't win the game.
And you talked about how this changing and questioning is affecting the quarterbacks themselves. How do you think this is affecting the team as a whole, not having someone that's set in stone there?
That's a great question. It's obviously difficult. You talk to the wide receivers coach, you talk to any of the assistants, and they won't say anything. They'll say, we don't care who's out there, we want to handle our unit. I was actually talking to Tony Hull, the running backs coach, and I asked him about the offensive line. He says, we don't worry about those guys, even though obviously they do. I think it's difficult because, you know, the players voted Montel Cozart captain for a reason. Obviously, you know, he's older, but they trust him, they like him. That's not to say they don't like Ryan Willis. But when you're just going back and forth, I'm sure it's frustrating for them. None of them have publicly said that. They're doing their part to kind of support the team and do what the team would want them to say. But at the same point, for a wide receiver, you really want consistency, and that is the one thing they're not getting.
And moving on to the defensive side of the ball, how is KU's defense looking?
Well, it's interesting. You give up 49 points or whatever it was to Baylor, and you might be talking about a poor defensive game. But again, well, first of all, 2 of those scores, one came on a turnover within the 10-yard line, another one was a pick 6. But the KU defense has not played poorly. They've actually been solid. I was actually talking about this with show producer Griffin Hughes before the show, and if you kind of made all the offenses the same, you looked at the defenses in the Big 12, KU might be right there in the middle, or they might even be a little bit above that. The defense has performed well. They've obviously had lapses, but that's what happens when you run the air raid. Your offense is ineffective, and the other team gets drive after drive after drive to score. And to be honest, I would say that KU's run game, the inability to move the ball on the ground, has affected their defense more than anything else because KU doesn't chew clock. The other team gets the ball, they drive down the field and score. You know, KU gets the ball back, now you need to give your defense a breather, and they haven't been able to do that. I talked to Tony Hull, he kind of deflected some of the questions. I asked him, they haven't really had great production. He said, well, we use 3 running backs, so if you put them together, maybe you see the production's a little bit better. At the same time, it's still obviously not getting the job done. KU's top 3 running backs are still about 200 yards short of Oklahoma State's top 3 running backs, and that's going to be an issue.
In this last game, you know, this blowout, it's not something that KU is looking for, but what we did get to see out of this blowout is some of the younger guys step in and get a chance. We saw Carter Stanley come in, make a pretty impressive drive, Khalil Herbert bring it into the end zone. What do you think having these younger guys come in, how do you think that's going to affect the future?
Well, there's a lot of experience that's going to be had for next year. Carter Stanley, someone you mentioned, a lot of people see him as the future. There are a couple other guys waiting in the wings that, you know, we'll have to wait and see. Let me give another name. This kind of goes the opposite of what you asked, so I apologize. But I wanted to mention this. Joe Deneen is still not returned because of an injury. So while he's out, other guys are getting a chance to fill that role. Really all around the defense, like you said. There's also Mike Lee, who stepped in and filled his role well. But, you know, when you're losing a mainstay of your defense, everyone kind of has to step up and take more responsibility. So to your point, I think really for the future, KU is solid in that they have a couple good transfers coming in. The recruiting has been solid. That's something that David Beatty's been good at, and that the young guys are getting a chance to play. Now the present, obviously not so much. They're still looking for their first Big 12 win in a couple years.
Always great to have you, Scott. Up next, the boys are going to be back, and we're going to be back in crunch time, and I might have to cut them off. So we'll be right back after this.